Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Michelle. Actually, it was a perfect setup for me, what you were offering. Because what I want to do is speak a little bit directly about a map and a pathway to move through this paradigm shift. Whoops, what happened? What up? Oh, there. Let's try that. I'll start with this image. And you can just take the image in for a moment. I believe that women, and men too, but my own research in the last 15 years has been with women, are in the midst of a profound rite of passage. That what we are here talking about today, in some ways what Helen was setting up, is not just about women need to learn a few new behavioral skills, we need to start to show up in leadership in a little bit different way, but that actually we are at the very edge of evolution. That we have come to the end of a way of being, mental models, a way of seeing that has been shaped for over 5,000 years by a masculine paradigm. And that wasn't wrong. In fact, many things in civilization have been created as a result of that. But it isn't sufficient for the challenges of today. But this is always how evolution moves forward, as Rajendra was saying yesterday. There is an urge in evolution herself, we could say, to move forward. But in this image you can see there is a woman at the edge, at the end of a path, and there's sort of a mist over in the mountain. Can't quite see what's ahead. And then no obvious way to get from here to there. And this is what I've spent 15 years decoding. First of all, could I really, and we, the people working with me, begin to see what is the new paradigm of leadership emerging for women that draws on all of our feminine and masculine capacities? What does that look like? That way of being that meets the complex challenges of today. And then, what's a pathway? Is there a pathway that we could actually count on to move there? So it's not just scrambling or grab a little behavioral skill here or learn a little something there, but actually a map and a path. And after 10 years of research, we'd really figured some things out. And my co-author and I decided, well, this has to get out further because we were reliably seeing women emerge with these higher order capacities, which I'll show you in a moment. And end of 2012, we finished the first draft of the book, and we're starting to look for publishers. And I felt ready to fly. Like this, I'm so ready to take this message into the world. I know we've discovered something important. This code is going to be really vital to women right now. And then on January the 3rd, 2013, I came home from work and found my husband dead. And my life took a very different course. So no, there was no flight right away. There was a very difficult and challenging descent. And within 6 months, all of the outer structures, the way I knew them, were gone. I sold our retreat center and estate. I left the island we lived on. I left the community. I restructured my business. It was like, sometimes I think of those Tibetan sand mandalas that the monks make, where they put little grains of sand painstakingly for a long period of time. And then when it's over and it's so beautiful, they just take a stick and go like that. Have you ever seen those? It's amazing. It's all gone. But I share this with you to say that what was remarkable to me was even what I knew theoretically. I'd already done a lot of work. I'd seen it in myself. I'd seen it in many other women. But without a shadow of a doubt, I am here today, now, standing on the stage with a published book, because this way of being that I'm going to describe to you now held up. So what I'm sharing with you, I want to put in that context, that these aren't just nice ideas. This is an operating system, what I call a mysterial operating system, that holds up under the most difficult circumstances, personally, I could imagine happening for me. But I'm not alone in that shakeup right now, and a number of other speakers have spoken about the challenges in their own lives. And I know from speaking to lots of women that many of us are feeling the shake right now. So let me ask, how many of you are feeling this pressure of transition, like you're between a rock and a hard place a little bit? Maybe like who you are on the inside doesn't totally translate to the outside. Or the relationships you're in aren't quite what they used to be, and you can't quite see how to move somewhere. Or the organization you're in, you can see there's something possible, but it's kind of in the mist. That how you are, just even, you worked so hard, you finally got to that position, and where's the there? How many are feeling any of this kind of stress or pressure, transition, basically? Yeah, that's quite a lot. So this is, we could say, the evolutionary urge itself. What if this pressure we're feeling, the suffering and the longing, like we can see another way of being, and maybe even this has gotten awakened over the last 2 days because there are lots of ideas, and it's something to hold the possibility of a new way of being and not know exactly how we're going to get there. But what if it's the sign of this new order, almost, I think, a new species of woman that's being called forth now by evolution, is emerging. And what is happening is we are pushing up against the structures, outdated now, in mind, heart, and body. This is Einstein's quote. We all know this quote, probably. This is how development goes. We create complexity with the consciousness that we have, and then we have to awaken our consciousness to meet those challenges. That's true at the personal level in terms of how we develop as individuals, but it's also true at the cultural level. So what we're talking about here then, and this became so clear to me at the beginning of the work, is a developmental move for women. I believe we have been stalled inside a masculine model of development that said we're whole and we're done. We've reached the top of the mountain, the hero's journey, we're here. When it isn't so. Actually, we need to turn on the tap again and start to unlock this innate potentiality. Now, when we were getting ready to write the book, we did a sort of synthesis of many of the studies that were out there, about 5 in particular, the current and future leadership skills that would be needed to address the challenges. Let me show you these. Now, you can see adaptability, creativity, ease with ambiguity and uncertainty, network thinking, building strategic alliances, sensing what is critical and unspoken. These are not simple capacities. They are complex, right? This is a way of seeing things differently, a way of being differently, and then a way of doing things differently. How do we get those capacities reliably? And this was the domain of our research. It must require then, it's developmental again, but we can think about it as an inner upgrade. And I like this metaphor because we all have the experience of knowing we have to upgrade our operating systems on their computers, right? And what happens when you reach the limits of your operating system? Chaos. What else happens? Sorry? It shuts down, it crashes, frustration. How could you be doing that now? I have a report to get out in an hour, like getting pissed off at the equipment itself. We know we need to upgrade, but why don't we do it? Sorry? Yeah, it would require change. It also would require stopping. We'd actually have to do it when we're so busy achieving. We might lose data, we might lose time, we might fall behind. So instead, we don't do it. We try rebooting the computer. We go to Hawaii, in my case in Seattle, or to Crete, probably over here. We get on vacation, we kind of relax, and then we come back again, reboot the computer, and then a month later, we're back where we were. So, really what is needed here is the upgrade, this is developmental again, of the inner operating system, the way we see ourselves, others, and the world. And two things that became really clear in our research right away. One, to do this, we would have to decode how women grow and develop. And it would absolutely require coming down and into the body. This has already been surfaced a number of times over the last few days, that this change that we're talking about cannot only take place in the mind. What we are missing is access to emotional intelligence and somatic intelligence, the enteric brain that Helen was referring to. And by the way, one thing that's kind of interesting, when I started out in this work, do you know that almost all of the studies, actually all of the studies until about 25 years ago, on human development were done using male subjects? So there was a sense that, well, we're studying humans, male and female probably develop in the same way. And what we've discovered is that isn't actually true, that there is a particular path that women develop through that it helps us to know if we want to unlock the next level. The other thing that became very clear was we'd have to engage all of our feminine and masculine. They actually co-arise in a polarity, in a dynamic polarity, not in isolation. In about 2010, we started to see the pattern arise. We started to see consistently more women showing these higher order capacities who had gone through our level 1 and level 2 programs. And what are we going to call this? I won't say my book goes into sort of more about how we came up with the name, but the word mysterial arose as a way to describe this way of being, which I think is the new woman of the future. It's a wise, loving, and powerful way of being that arises, now that's to say it's innate, it arises when all of our feminine and masculine essences are moving freely through the mind, through the heart, and through the body, in partnership with the great unknown, with the mystery of life, with the unfolding universe herself. And I believe, like this oak tree coming out of an acorn, it is an innate potentiality. Just like development, anyway, from when we're very little. How is it that we all of a sudden go from crawling to walking, from walking to speaking? It's innate. It's like something turns on, and we can do it. I think, similarly, this potential is within us all. So then it becomes, okay, how do we create the conditions for it to arise, and what's the path that will help to turn it on? The way of the Mysterial woman requires that we upgrade how we live, we love, and we lead. All domains. And this became really clear, although I was a leadership specialist, you could say. It became really clear early that this wasn't just about leadership in isolation. It was how we live our lives that needed to really shift. So let me show you in very high level here the sequence itself. This is the code. Now the code follows the developmental path itself. Basically goes back over how women develop. And we develop through these primary yin and yang, or feminine and masculine gateways. And we found in our research that each of the gates had an archetype that aligned with them. This sort of pattern, this magnet in the unconscious around which development cohered. The first polarity is the more familiar one, the mother and the hero. The mother, great, loving, all warm, inclusive, and then the hero, that sort of more agentic, piercing energy of the masculine. But what we also found, which was very exciting, was we were starting to see forms of the masculine and the feminine that weren't held in that more familiar feminine-masculine distinction. And that is the father. So the second polarity was the father. Now this is a more static masculine that helps you build and contain the structures of an adult life. And opposite that is a more dynamic, almost masculine, feminine, which is the archetype of the maiden, which is where we bust things apart. It's kind of the wild woman that we haven't quite understood where she's fit before. And when the second polarity gets unlocked, then this radical synthesis happens, and in comes the crone. Now, the crone, or the wise woman, is the first time there's an archetype that actually brings together yin and yang inside ourselves. That's quite a shift. Now, what was interesting for us, and again, I'm just showing this super fast, is to show you that once we had tracked this on the individual level in terms of woman's development, we saw the same pattern arising in the collective. That these archetypal patterns had lit up from the beginning of time. And why? Because they were required to, from an evolutionary perspective, to meet the next challenge. And we believe that where we are right now is the setting up the potential for this very wise woman, the crone energy, to come in that brings together yin and yang. That we could call it an integral wave. So here's I'll just skim through the first polarity just to show you. In each one of these polarities, we found a deep embodied limiting belief that was in the body itself, and a liberating belief. And see if you can relate to these. First gate, primary gate, the mother. This sense of, I am not enough, that's actually coded in our personal cells and in our collective cells. Just feel that for a moment. I am not enough. Some way that might live in you. The ways we override that. But the liberating belief when the gate is open is, I am enough just as I am. I am enough just as I am. And that's a very different way to live. And when that arises, radiant presence is the nectar, you could say, that comes from that deep work. The opposite end of this polarity, the hero, the limiting belief. I have to do to be of value. Can you relate to this? I have to do to be of value. Now, what if this were informing how you were in the world? I am empowered to do what is mine to do, which is not everything. And a kind of empowered action arises through that. Where do we start? We start close in, right here. And this is really what this day is about. It is, all of these great ideas. Ultimately, development happens right here. So start close in. In summary, women, I believe, have an adaptive advantage right now. We are the ones being invited, you could say, by life itself to grow. And it's not comfortable. And discomfort is a part of the deal. And we actually have to learn to welcome discomfort. The outcome is unknown. We are in a very uncertain time, but it will be shaped by us, one way or the other. We are needed. And as this conference shows us, we will need each other. We need to find ways to support each other as we are in this bold frontier of evolution. And I'll just close with this beautiful quote by Arundhati Roy. Another world is not only possible, this is evolution, she's on her way. On a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. Thank you. Thank you.